YouTube channel for exclusive videos, in-depth takes, initials and password games, and behind-the-scenes content. Search KFAN on YouTube and hit subscribe today, or go to KFAN.com/watch.
I want to apologize to our next guest, Ben Goessling, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Ben, there's a lot of post-morteming to do, as you might expect, on the Minnesota Wild season. We finally got out of round one, and yet, as you know how this works. I've said this a couple of times yesterday. If the Wild had lost Game 5 in sort of, I don't know, more predictable fashion, like they were down a goal or two the whole game, people would be disappointed, but I think they'd say, yeah, it's kind of what I expected after they laid an egg in Game 4. But when it happens the way it does it played out, it becomes cruel to people, right? Because they do start getting their hopes back up. Hey, we can steal 5. We go back home. Tonight would have been a game, 2 Game 6s tonight in the Twin Cities. Who the hell's to say? And so I think it's true in your sport too. It's not always the loss. It's the way you lose sometimes that can get people going.
No doubt. It's that thing of you have hope. And because I remember the beginning of that game, they're looking as commanding as they have all series. Mm-hmm. They're outskating the Avs, and you're like, they haven't outskated the Avs much at all. And then you're sitting there kind of doing that math of, hey, they win this. They're back at home. And then Game 7, you get a hot goalie, you get a weird bounce, hockey's a funny game, anything can happen. And it's that feeling of this might actually – I think that's the thing in Minnesota sports so much. It's not just the losing, it's the feeling of it's the old Charles thing. I'm finally going to get to kick that football, and Lucy always pulls it. I think that was the lead to my story after the title game in Philadelphia. After they won the Minneapolis Miracle, it's like, hey, it might finally be the moment, but nope. And that game was pretty emphatic that Lucy pulled the football, but you go through that exercise of, hey, this might finally be the moment, and then something happens like that just says, hey, add it to the list of times that this has happened, and it gets pretty, I think, deflated for people when it happens as much as it seems to.
No question about that. So the big schedule release takes place yesterday. Everybody does end up trying to analyze the schedule. We knew who they were going to play, but now it's okay. Where are some spots to make some hay in this schedule? Where are some spots where you say, oh my God, they better have some victories, saved up as equity to get them through some tough stretches. Last year, I thought we had that meat grinder in the middle. What do you see? What struck you about the Vikings schedule as it was released yesterday officially?
Well, the start of it was the thing that, and the last time they played back-to-back division games to open the season was 2013, where they were coming off of a playoff trip. They had expectations of being better in a year where they thought Christian Ponder was going to take a step after the season finale against the Packers, and they lose the first 2. They blew a lead in Chicago in a game that in 14 years on this beat, I don't know that I've ever been in a locker room that's more tense than that locker room in Chicago was after the game in 2013. We got in there really quick, and it was like, hey, do you guys need a few minutes before we come in? And you typically get like a 10-minute cooling off period. And for some reason, we got in there pretty quick, and it was obvious that they needed to have a little more time to cool off with how hot everybody still was with the way that game ended with Jay Cutler throwing a touchdown pass, I believe, to Martellus Bennett. But that was the last time a stretch like this happened, and when you lose those games, they become doubly important because of the division consequences.
Right.
So what you have here is 2 games against division opponents that made the playoffs last year, and it means that whatever the quarterback competition is going to look like this offseason and what it's going to look like to form an offensive identity around that quarterback, you have to do it very quickly.
Sure
because
do.
You're not getting a soft launch into this schedule. So that was the big one that stuck out to me. There's a stretch in November where it's 3 out of 4 on the road, and I think Buffalo's the one home game in there, and that stretch ends with Mexico City. That's pretty tough as well.
Yep.
Towards the end, I think there's some things that, and they have a lot of home games toward the end, and there's some attractive matchups there, but you have to get through an early stretch of a lot of road games and then that tough stretch in the middle before you might get some rewards from that very back-loaded set of home games.
It's interesting you mentioned about the whatever the quarterback situation is. We're all, I think, mainly assuming that Kyler will be the starter at the beginning of the season. But I thought I saw or read an assertion, might have even been last week, from a .com Tom, indicating his belief that on the basis of the people he talks to, that what the Vikings are really hoping for and wanting is a big-time, serious training camp competition at the position. And I'm trying to figure out whether the people who are telling him that mean it, or that's the impression they want to give, when deep down it's going to be shocking if Kyler Murray isn't the guy almost from the start of training camp. Do you have any better sense of exactly what the Vikings really, truly hope for, no matter what they are saying to other people?
Yeah, I have wondered that. I saw that soundbite, and I've wondered that a little bit as well, of is this for impressions or is this going to be an open competition? I do think their hope is that J.J. McCarthy responds well to this and that J.J. McCarthy treats it as a challenge, not an indictment of him. Obviously, if he had done everything they wanted last year, they wouldn't be doing this. So it is a reflection of the fact that he didn't give them exactly what they wanted to see. But I think their hope is that he comes out and says, all right, I'm going to go win this job. And from what I've heard, people I've talked to, that is very much how he's talked about it, saying, I am going to go win this thing. So we'll see if that ends up happening. I think the response they've sought from him has been very much what he has communicated to people he's talked to. But I do think with Kyler Murray coming in and you look at the need for somebody that gives you more stability at the position, Kevin O'Connell talked a lot about this idea of a baseline at the position, and some of that's durability, and Murray has a lot of questions to answer there as well. But I think the fact that he has done it and started more games and had more experience at this level makes him an attractive option. I would think that if McCarthy wins the job, it will be because he did enough to take it.
Yeah.
I think if it's kind of a stalemate, I would imagine Kyler Murray probably gets the chance to be the starter. I think there's a lot of hope in how McCarthy comes out of this and how he approaches it, but my money would still be on Kyler Murray.
The schedule does play into this. I think you're right in that there ain't no easing into this. So if they've learned anything, it's you can't give anything away in this league. And if your first two games are against worthy opponents and they are division opponents as well, to me that contributes to the notion of we are preparing. Our number one goal in training camp is to prepare Kyler Murray to be as up to speed with what we want to do offensively and what we want to change in our offense to fit him as anything else. It's almost to me as if you can't have. I would love, I'm sure you would too as a reporter, an old-fashioned, it's wide open, baby, and this job's going to be won in training camp. Yeah. I just don't know if that's realistic, especially when you factor in the schedule. And the fact that, as we said, we think KOC is safe, but there's got to be a little bit of nervousness creeping in here eventually if there's not a playoff move here pretty soon with a victory.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you're looking at heading into year 5, needing a playoff win, probably needing another playoff run here. I don't think anybody is looking at his job as being any kind of jeopardy. His contract goes for the 4 years here.
Right.
So it would be a pretty big surprise, especially given the way he is still viewed in that building. But I think he knows as well as anybody that NFL job security is quite often tied to quarterback performance. And that when he's talked about that baseline of when we have consistent quarterback play that we can count on every week, that they're available, that they play well, we've been pretty good. We've won a lot of games and made the playoffs. So when he talks about that, it does tell you that some of these things are in his mind. I mean, the quote about, my feelings on JJ haven't changed, but the timeline has, I think it's as good of a indication of that as any, that no, this is a little bit different when it's year 5 and you're still trying to find the footing here. So, yeah, I think a lot of those things do play into it. And the other part I wonder about is they're not going to play the starters a lot in the preseason. It's not like they're going to use the preseason games to evaluate a ton. They'll have some joint practices that I think they'll try to get some things out of, I would imagine. But the preseason is not exactly a long look at a lot of these players in the way that it might be in a previous era. So that means the reps you have in camp and the chances you have to look at these guys in camp need to be really good, and they need to be convincing. And I think the other thing with the schedule, if it is Kyler Murray, the first opponent they face hired Kyler Murray's old coach as its new defensive coordinator. Jonathan Gannon, with Murray in Arizona, is now the Packers D coordinator. And that means that Murray has seen some of the things that he wants to do. It may look different in Green Bay, but it also means that Gannon has practiced against Murray a lot. He knows the things that throw him off. So all the more important to be locked in with your offense if he is going to be the starter and be ready to go, because you have a head coach, a former head coach, now a defensive coordinator.
Ben Goessling?
I'm here.
Oh, there we go. We lost you. We lost you for about 10 seconds. I got one more to wrap. We'll wrap it up to be a little shorter today. So it seems as if the list of guys that we're wanting to talk to do seem to be more meat and potatoes, scouting background, old-fashioned guys. Now, they may not be old-fashioned guys, but they come from that side of it, right?
Yeah.
If that's true, if that's sort of what we are hinting that we now have a new priority or new belief in once again, an old new belief in an odd way, does that make it less likely that Brzezinski is going to be the guy? Because he's been around there forever, and I know he's worked with all sorts, including scouts and so forth, but that doesn't really represent his background, does it?
Yeah, it is a list that reflects a different approach than the one they talked to a lot of former scouts and kind of guys from the scouting background the last time too, obviously. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was the guy they hired, but this list has been pretty uniformly from that side of things, which does make you wonder, is there going to be something where they say we're going to hire a young GM and pair him with Rob Brzezinski if Rob Brzezinski comes out with some other type of title, right, a little more involvement in the football operation overall than just doing salary cap stuff. I could see something like that being the solution, and I'm sure Rob Brzezinski is going to get a look here as well, but I would be a little surprised if he doesn't come out of this with some larger involvement or some different title that reflects the work he did and the value he provided this offseason. So this list has been a lot of younger GM candidates, guys that have been assistant GMs in other places. That, Dave Ziegler would be the exception to that, probably, in terms of the guy that's had a little more experience, been around the league a little bit longer. But I do wonder if the ultimate solution is, hey, we're going to hire a young GM, make Rob Brzezinski something like a president of football operations. I know they've talked about a traditional structure, but I think there's probably some ways to get to that, and you have maybe a little broader role for him and have somebody with a scouting background that's got more control over the final roster. I don't know for sure that that's what will happen, but the way they're looking with that list does kind of make me wonder if you try to put pieces together. It's like, yeah, I could see something like that being on their minds.
I do have actually one more, an Adrian Peterson question. How far back did you cover Adrian?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
My first year on the beat was his MVP year.
Okay. So refresh my memory. PA had him on today because of the news, that he's going to be inducted into the Vikings Ring of Honor. And there was an interesting part of the interview. I'm half listening, half not. I'm going to try to piece it together, where Adrian was talking about the coaches he played with and the ups and downs and so forth. And I thought he was talking about the Childress era. He made a comment about how the running backs coach at the time, one of the assistants, newer assistants, had called him to kind of, I think, just, reach out. And that Adrian mentioned in the interview with PA today that he didn't return the call, or he wasn't there to answer at the time, and he never called him back. And that he looks back on it, he kind of regrets that he was that remote and he wasn't that helpful, and that it might have contributed to some tension. Was that Do you remember anything like that? Was there any sort of, does that ring a bell to you? I didn't remember hearing anything about that issue, but he almost sounded regretful that he wasn't maybe, as, rah-rah team-oriented with that part of the regime.
Yeah.
And he just threw it out there. The fact that he volunteered it, I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting that he said that. I mean, I didn't cover him in the Childress era, but there was quite a few Childress holdovers by the time I came around with Leslie Frazier as the head coach in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to remember who that would have been. James Saxon, I think, was the RB coach at the time when I started on the beat. But I think in general, there were certainly times where, whether it was showing up for off-season workouts, and he generally was, I think, around for a lot of those from what I remember, but whether it was that or whether it was, maybe being a little more bought into the scheme, being a little more coachable. I mean, because if you talk to offensive linemen, they have all sorts of stories about, Adrian ran this play to the wrong gap and ran up the offensive lineman's rear end, and it didn't matter because he bounced out, made a jump cut, and went 8 yards for a touchdown. So some of that stuff he could do because he was a freak. I mean, I think watching that MVP season is the most remarkable thing I've ever covered in my career. But, yeah, I think there's probably some regret in some of that. I know by the end, the last year with Mike Zimmer, he tore his meniscus in week 2, and there was a lot of discussion about should he come back, and he said, well, I'm going to come back. We're in the playoff race. And then the first game he did play, I think he fumbled early, got hurt again, and they lost, and he said, I'm shutting it down.
Yeah.
I know a lot of those things towards the end contributed to a lot of friction. And really when he was coming back from the suspension, I remember because he and I actually developed the kind of relationship where he would pick up the phone and sometimes talk for a half hour or longer. Or, I think that time was probably 60 minutes where he started talking about some of the tension that had developed with the organization and feeling like he wanted more support from them during the suspension.
Yeah, I remember that.
There's a lot of that. That's
true.
Yeah, and a lot of that you could say, well, dude, did you deserve that? I mean, they're trying to do right by their sponsors and do right by just the overall image and how this all looked, and there's a lot to figure out there too. But there was a lot of that in those last couple of years after that felt like probably a matter of time, and that's more in the Zimmer era than Childress.
Yeah, maybe it was then.
Yeah,
it's possible he was talking about the Zimmer era because I was in and out of it, but he did. He doesn't usually bring stuff up quite like that, and that's what I thought was interesting. It almost made it sound like he did have some regrets about how some of that stuff went down.
Yeah, I think there probably is some of that. I mean, I do remember times talking to him where you could ask him a question and he would the fun thing about interviewing him was he would generally tell you what he was thinking. He didn't really talk in cliches, and there were times where he might have said a little too much. I can remember when he got suspended, he was talking about, I'm thinking about retiring and seeing if my sprinting career can get a reboot to see if I can make the Olympic team. It's like, okay, this is probably a little bit unlikely, but that was the interesting thing about interviewing him is he would typically tell you what was on his mind, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think there were probably some of those moments towards the end of that of, I've been the man, but if I had handled things a little bit differently, maybe the Ring of Honor thing happens a little sooner, or maybe there's things where he's around a little bit more often. I mean, you have things like this with Randy Moss over the years too of how does it end and what does that have to say about the next phase of it. But, whatever it is, it's good to see that they're doing it. It's good to see that he's going to be back in the mix for that kind of a thing. But yeah, it is interesting to think about him for as brilliant as he was. There's probably a little bit of an element in his mind of what might have been on some things. And the fascinating thing with him, like I say, is he will generally entertain those things and let you know what he's thinking.
Yeah. And, they didn't get him a quarterback very often. I mean, that's got to enter into this thing. I mean, they even kidded about that. His reputation, as was not a particularly good pass catcher. But in Favre's first year, he was very good at that, which leads to the question of, all right, was it he wasn't that good a pass catcher, or how much of it also was having a really good quarterback who knows how to and when to get the ball to the running back?
Oh, yeah. I remember in 2013 in London, they started 0-3, and Ponder had broken his rib, and he got asked, because Matt Castle came in and started the game, and he got asked after the game, who do you want to start? And he just looked at whoever asked the question kind of with that Adrian raised eyebrow and just said, "What you think?" Like, it's obvious I want there to be a change at quarterback.
Yeah.
So, yes, there were a lot of those things where I think he realized I'm going to have a hard time winning a championship if I don't. I mean, for as brilliant as he was, especially in that 2012 season where he kind of carried them to the playoffs, they needed more at quarterback to maximize what he was. And, yeah, he is the last non-QB to win the MVP, which speaks to what he did, but also speaks to how much of a quarterback-driven league it is. And that's probably the irony of the whole thing, is that the guy that was the last great MVP level, or at least the last one to win it at a non-quarterback position, ultimately needed the MVP quarterback to go on the Super Bowl run that he never got to go on.
Appreciate you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will chat next week. Thanks, Ben.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
Ben Goessling helping us out. So I can get him back on hold via the cursor. There we go. On a beautiful Friday afternoon, hot Friday afternoon. Summer has finally arrived in the Twin Cities rather abruptly. I don't know for how long. In any case, we'll make this the bottom of the hour pause. We still got Lavelle Neal III to get to. If you have questions or comments for him, you know how to reach us. The Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 64686. We'll probably cover a lot of ground with Lavelle on the Wolves, on the Wild. His excuse making for lack of excuse making for the Frost, and we'll include some of your questions. We are going the distance till 6:30 tonight. Don't forget the Wolves Game 6 encounter here at home, not far from where we are, downtown Minneapolis against the San Antonio Spurs, can be listened to right here on the 100,000-watt FM flamethrower. The Fan. So come back and chat with Lavelle in just a couple minutes.
Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barreiro.
My next guest, I've rarely been more disappointed in him than I am this week. I'm hoping that we can come to some agreement and that he will take a little bit more responsibility than he has earlier in the week on this subject. Lavelle Neal III joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you have any idea what I'm disappointed in you about?
I have no flipping idea because it could be something different every week.
Well, there's some truth to that. So here's the sequence that had me very concerned whether somebody got to you, because the story breaks the day of what's supposed to be the decisive Game 5 in the Women's Hockey League semifinal series, right, against Montreal. That the game is being postponed. At that point, we didn't know when it was going to be rescheduled. Eventually, it was rescheduled for the next night. But at that point, I see a couple tweets from you, something to the effect of, I didn't know that, there was a fear virus going around, something to that effect, which I took as you saying, this is suspicious. This doesn't smell right. This doesn't pass the smell test. And that, in effect, they got to play the game with the people that they have. But by the time the game's played and you write off of it, it's, well, the Frosts lose and they don't have a good excuse. The excuse about the game being delayed a day is just not good enough. So what did Stan Kasten, who I think helps run that league, did he call you? Did somebody buy you off?
Stanley actually was in the press box at Grand Casino Arena for game 3.
Yeah.
So I didn't see him.
Oh,
I heard he was around, but I didn't get a chance to say hello, because I used to butt heads with, well, not butt heads. I used to engage Stan through the years when he was at various baseball winter meetings.
Sure. Yeah.
So he was the executive with the Braves and refusing to talk to the media. So, but no, basically what I wrote in the column was kind of was born out of what happened in the game, which was a lot of things that happened, was similar to what has happened in previous games in that series, where this offensively gifted team that led the league with 91 goals scored during the regular season all of a sudden was shut down. And, and in the game in which they had to have, look what happened. They got shut down for 4 out of 5 games. They were dominated by the defense and Anne-Marie Desbienne, who's one of the best goaltenders in the world. They couldn't, she was like Wall, and they could not figure out a way to get over her or around her or under her with shots. So I was just saying, at the end of the day, after this tummy gate, as I called it, the Frost staff looked at themselves and realized that we screwed this up. We could have possibly been out of the situation where we had to play Game 5 in the first place if we just play up to our standards and our abilities, but they did not. So that's what I was getting at. I still think it's really crappy in the league, to pull what they pulled, and especially when they announced that the game was postponed. And the Frost players said they went down. They were headed for their pregame meal when they found out that the game was going to be postponed. But 5 hours after that announcement came, they said, okay, Game 5 is going to be scheduled for the next day. We're like, what?
Exactly.
So, that is fishy. And it's a question of integrity. It's a question of, did they want out all Canadian final? It raises all those opinions. And now they've let it be known that if you have a virus, if 8 players have a cold or the flu or in the locker room, can they kind of, hey, league office, can we not play today? What's that all about? To me, that's disrespecting the game. So I did express my disappointment in the league for the stance it did take. And I tried to monitor Montreal media the next day after Game 5. And I think someone asked the head coach about it once, and I never heard any comments from the players about what was going on in that locker room.
Yeah.
And they get a fuller explanation, so there's still more questions than answers. And I was hoping that the Frost would learn something, because one of their own, Flanagan, was a defender for their first 2 championship teams, and she's with Montreal. I was hoping they were contacting her, getting some intel and figuring out ways to divulge it to us, but that didn't happen. So, that aspect is weird, Dan, and it's not a good look for a professional sports league. But at the end of the day, the Frost cannot solve the Victoires.
You still have to play.
That's why they're out of the series.
You still have to play. I get that. I think it's inexcusable, and it's a terrible precedent, and it's it's a newer league. I get that. They probably don't have the number of players in reserve they would like, because they got to work themselves up to that place financially. But it wouldn't happen in any other league. It's a terrible precedent to set. And I think what also hurt is, and this may again speak to the relative lack of experience in these sorts of issues. Although it's a league basically Stan Kasten's running. He's got all kinds of experience. Is they didn't really get ahead of it. There wasn't any sort of explanation in which somebody was up front and saying, here's where we are with this thing. Here's exactly why we thought we had to do what we had to do. And as a result, it adds to this conspiratorial notion that they were just kind of making it up as they went along, right? If you have people out front who seem to very boldly assert, here's why we're where we are, here's why we're doing something we sure as hell didn't want to do, maybe you can convince some people. But it was all so quiet, and what further contributed to it is, as you say, the next day they're playing. The next night they're playing. That doesn't hold water either, right? That, I think, also leads to the conspiracy theories.
Well, here's the other thing. I slightly disagree with you on the possibility of this happening in another league, because you do have a league in which the commissioner basically dressed as the city of New York for a championship series against the Lynx. And if the New York Liberty had 6 players that had gastritis, or whatever you want to however you pronounce it, could they have possibly postponed a tie-breaking game?
Yeah, who knows? We'll find out somewhere down the road. All right, the Wild are out. We'll get to them in a minute. The Wolves are not dead yet. I had dreams, I think a lot of us did, of 2 Game 6s in St. Paul and Minneapolis tonight. But now, alas, we're down to 1, the one at Target Center. And what's interesting is I think there are people who believe that the Wolves can extend the series, but I don't think hardly anybody gives them any chance to actually win the series. Where are you? Are they done tonight? Are they automatically done Sunday if they don't win tonight? Or do you actually give them a chip sharing a chance to shock everybody and win the last 2 games of the series?
Well, I think they could win tonight, but a lot of things have to go right for them. First of all, the real Julius Randle has to show up. I think he's been very disappointing throughout this series, and then especially when they needed him. I mean, you know, it's not necessarily the rule of thumb now that you have like a 3-headed monster. You have like 3 really elite players, and then you kind of build a team around them, like the big 3 concept that, you know, D Wade and LeBron and Chris Bosh formed with the Miami Heat. But I think the Wolves only have like a big 1 and sometimes a 1.5. I mean, who's the second most dangerous player on the Wolves besides Anthony Edwards? It hasn't been Randle in this series.
Not at all.
Jay McDaniels could be that guy. He sure in hell ain't Rudy. No. And whoever is playing with Ant is in the backcourt isn't either. So that's been troubling. But that's the one thing. That's the one thing that's made the Wolves unique is that they have been to conference finals without that type of roster structure because they had the big stifle tower in the middle. But it's really hurting them in this series. And Wembanyama, now they poked the bear when they slapped him in the head and he elbowed Nas Reed and got suspended for the rest of the game. He came out as a force of nature in the last game, and it was like good night, Irene. So for the Wolves to pull this off, Randle and Jaden McDaniels have to be on top of their game. I have no doubt that Anthony Edwards is going to play well. I have no doubt that A.L. DeSumo is going to find a way to contribute, either if it's by scoring or by rebounding and accumulating assists. Nas Reed could be hit and miss too, I guess. But to me, I think Michael Ram mentioned it. This could be an indictment on a referendum on how Julius Randle and Jay McDaniels approach an elimination game.
Well, here's the one thing I'll take exception with, because it follows the national declaration that somehow it was the Wolves who poked the bear. The fact of the matter is, let's be clear about something. He got fouled on that play. He did not get mauled on that play. And he responded with one of the most vicious elbows that I've seen in covering 40 years of NBA basketball. That was so this idea has got to stop, Lavelle, that somehow he was the victim, but you know what? Now he's PO'd and he's going to. It's like he's the one who created the foul, the over the top foul that got him disqualified from the game. We have to stop acting like somehow he was the aggrieved character. They guarded him hard. They have been physical with him. That's the nature of basketball. It's the nature of being a big man, I think, forever and ever. I just don't like this notion that somehow, well, be careful getting him, pissed off. He's the guy who delivered the cheap shot, right? If anybody should be bothered, you could argue it's the Wolves and Nas Reed. He's not the victim. Wemby is not the victim.
I will ask that. I'll answer both parts of your statement. The first part is what the poking was when Jaden McDaniels hit him in the head during that aggressive defense on him that set him off and led to the flagrant elbow.
Yeah, but there was nothing in that play. That was not even called. Did the referee call anything on that play?
He was hit in the head, though. It just wasn't called.
He was fouled. You're making it sound like he was. I haven't heard anybody suggest he was assaulted the way you're suggesting.
No, I didn't say he was assaulted. I didn't say he was assaulted. I just said,
God. I can't believe
Daniels caught him in the head with his hand.
You're falling.
And he got pissed off with an elbow.
I can't believe you're falling for this.
And when you're 7'4", you start throwing elbows. You know, your elbows are right at shoulder neck length. So
stop. This is ridiculous. Lavelle.
Webby lost his cool.
My God, you can't be serious with this. I can't let this continue down this road. The player responsible for
that's not a lie. It's facts.
Yeah, but
what he got hit in the head during that whole skirmish.
But you're making that sound as if that act of violence is what got him to say, "I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore." The shot he threw, the measured, deliberate. You could see it in slow motion. It was not, he waited, looked to see who was there, and elbowed him, hoping to get him in the face, ended up getting him in the neck. That's the aggrieved party is Naz Reid. The rest of it, I haven't heard anybody national suggest that the rest of it was anything but good, hard physical basketball. People get fouled and hit in the head all the time. You're making it sound like the Wolves crossed some line that made it incumbent upon Wemby to say, I'm going to take a stand here. That's ridiculous. If Draymond Green does what Wemby did, he would be getting killed. But because he's the new big thing, we're acting somehow like, boy, you know what? He had to stand up for himself, and by God, he did. Maybe he was a little over the line, but he did. This is insane.
I did not say that this turned into Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and Jay McDaniels just hauled off and cold-cocked Wemby. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying while they were playing him tough, his arm came down and hit Wemby in the head, and he got pissed off. And, yes, he turned, he looked, and he threw the elbow. And that's on Wemby. And he got suspended. You know, you could argue maybe he should have been more than fine for that. My other response to your statement is that if you want to talk about flagrant elbows, go back in the historical data links and look up Metta World Peace versus James Harden and tell me about how that elbow was thrown and the damage it did. Because that was a little bit worse than what Wemby did to Nasri.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, we're talking about degrees of violence. This has happened. Johnny and I were talking about this too. The whole, if you watch the broadcast off the last game, the TV, everybody's making it sound like, and you know what? By God, Wemby exacted his revenge. And I'll say again, that's a mischaracterization of the event. If anybody should feel they need to avenge, it's the guy who got hit in the throat. And again, the only reason we're not talking about this more, or that it doesn't look worse, is that he didn't knock a guy out, which he could have with that elbow. And for some reason, the lazy angle that we're hearing nationally is like, well, yeah, you know what? Look how Wemby stood up for himself, and he got PO'd, and now the Wolves are paying. And I'm going, let's see. Wemby's the guy who got thrown out when everybody agrees he had to be thrown out, but somehow it was the Wolves who crossed some kind of imaginary line. I just don't like that narrative because I just don't think I think it doesn't track with what took place. That's all I'm saying.
I just want to be clear here that I'm not trying to let Wemby off the hook on this. He committed a flagrant foul that deserved the ejection and deserved a fine.
Right.
And someone could argue that maybe he could be suspended again. I'm just saying there was action during that whole play that took part, and there was a body part of Jaden McDaniels that collided with the cranium of the 7'4" Victor Wembanyama.
It's called a foul.
Happened.
That's a foul.
That's all I'm saying.
That's a common foul.
I'm not trying to stick up for Wemby by any chance of the imagination. And I'm not blaming the Wolves for anything. I thought that maybe that was the formula they could use to keep him in more trouble in game 4. 5. Because it's 5. So I thought they would keep poking the bear to see if they could set him off and get him in more trouble.
Yeah, well, so
I'm not defending the guy.
What they can't do is be afraid to lean on him. That you can't. That's the problem with this whole narrative. To me, what Wemby did was, in a sense, respond. To me, he delivered an apology to his teammates. Like, I owe you a great performance because I took myself out of the game, a key game, by doing something stupid that if anybody but the popular Wemby does, we say, that's a hothead, man. You can't do that. That's a dangerous play. That's all I'm trying to say. And I think wherever he got his motivation from, it's his teammates he owed the explanation to. And just to come back and respond by playing in a very good game.
I want to see Johan Berenger coming to the game with Gobert, and they both go after Wemby to get him pissed off, and we can call it a French connection.
Well, they're going to have to do more than attempt to get physical with Wemby. We all understand that. They got to be smart in whatever their approach is. I'm firmly in the camp. I came around to being convinced, listening to some national people, that he should have been suspended a game. In addition, I don't like the comeback to that is always, well, you know what? He got thrown out. It was early in the game, right? It was, I want to say it was early in the second quarter. It was definitely the first half. And so that is a suspension. When the fact that you commit the crime early in the game should have, to me, zero to do with the number of games that you get suspended. I don't think one thing should have anything to do with the other. I think that's silly. The idea that, well, if it had come in the fourth quarter, maybe, but this came in the second quarter, that's not the Wolves' problem. Or any other team that's playing him that has to absorb the blow. I think it was worthy of a second game, and it was certainly worthy of a fine. And I'm also convinced that if David Stern was still running the league, it would have been. That was a bad hit. But do you know what the problem is? He's not Draymond Green. He's the quote-unquote face of the league, and the league, I think, has a hard time sort of sending the message that they should, which is that kind of elbow delivered that deliberately. There was a delay before he delivered it. Means we have to tell you, you can't do that, or we're going to have other players say, I'm going to go ahead and I got a free shot at somebody.
Well, first of all, Draymond should have been suspended for more games than he has been in his career because it didn't stop him from playing the way he wanted to play. And there was never a behavior modification with him. And they should have sat his ass out for maybe a month or send him to counseling or something a couple times more. Intentionality should be punished. I agree. And Wemby intentionally threw the elbow, just like Manson with the Avalanche, intentionally
with the stick. Yes.
The Wild player, the big tree, 6'7", McCarron. That was intentional with that butt end of his stick, and it made contact. The fact that they claimed he couldn't see if there was actual contact, that's bogus. Look, the fact that he went up in that area with that stick shows intentionality, and that should be punished.
All right, let's do this. I'm way behind. Let's get a break in. We got more time with Lavelle. We'll get into some more on this series and then also a little bit of postmortem on the Wild, who unfortunately didn't keep up their end of the bargain. We could have had, think about it, dual games, game sixes, same night in an arena in St. Paul in Minneapolis, but alas, game 5 ensued the way it did. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Barreiro on the Fan.
Championship level pizza and get set for tip-off. Find the nearest Carboni's today, Carboni'sPizza.com.
Lavelle E. Neal III back with us for part 2 of the spirited conversation. Did I hear you earlier today call for Heinze's head in the wake of the Wild being eliminated in very, very devastating fashion, blowing a 3-goal lead in Game 5?
No, but I think he's one of the culprits, though, that needs to be wrapped here for how this team kind of crumbled in that game. It was just really disappointing to see how the last 2 periods played out. Yes, the Avalanche raised their game in the second period, but the Wild are in a position where they could have met that. I was upset because they forced a goalie change after 1 period. And when you see the goalie coming into the game, you got to start smelling blood in the water and go for some wise man named Dan Barreiro, use the phrase, foot on throat, and go after and finish his team off and throw punch at this goalie coming off the bench and see if you can make it 4-0. Because I agree with Russo. He tweeted, I think, in the second period that if the Wild get the 4, the Avs may throw their hands up and capitulate, and then you're coming back here for a Game 6. But instead, they pretty much let the Avalanche throw a house party in their defensive zone throughout the second period. And then in the third period, I just had a problem with the mentality. There's X's and O's, and there's like substitution can be upset about, why was Middleton on the ice for the tying goal instead of, your all-world defender, Hughes. Why isn't he on the ice for that moment instead of Middleton, who had a really rough series? And I don't know if that may cost him a roster spot going forward. But either someone in the locker room's got to say, hey, we got to finish off this flipping team. Let's not just be satisfied, clearing the puck and losing these battles in the neutral zone And, and playing on our end, O&M so much. Yeah, it's great to be able to absorb pressure, and it's great to be able to limit shots on goal. But, my God, make a pay for it on the other end of the ice once in a while. They didn't do that for the entire third period. And I was sitting with a guy who knows a hell of a lot more hockey with me, and he was like, it was like they're just trying to run the clock out here. He says, I don't like this. And I didn't like it either. And so, to me, that's coaching staff issues. That's locker room leadership issues. And, just X's and O issues, too, when I was talking about personnel on the ice. And I still don't know why, after, years and years and years, they still suffer with power play and penalty kill. That's on the coaching staff as well. So, everybody needs to take a shot here for how this game in particular wound out, because they very well should be back here playing in Game 6.
Well, we talk all the time about sometimes the potential dangers of playing what we call in the business a prevent defense. There's also such a thing as prevent offense, and that, I think, is what galls a lot of people. That's the first thing Louis brought up yesterday. You knock their goalie back out of the game. They've got to go back to a goalie who has struggled in the second period. And so what's incumbent upon the Wild, even with the 3-0 lead? It's get on them. Keep the pressure on. Don't go into a prevent offense, which is largely what the team did, and it caught up with them. Because sooner or later in a game like that, Colorado's good. The feel is gonna start changing, right? Even if they're not scoring, there's a sense of, well, they're getting a better part of the action. They're gaining confidence. They're on their home ice. They say, hey, we get another goal here. We get 2 goals here. We're really in good shape. So I think that does, in part, have to go on. There have to be some questions with for the head coach. That and the thing he said after Game 4, if he meant it, the notion that the players consciously did not, from the beginning of the game, follow the game plan that had helped them win Game 3, that's not just an indictment on the players to me. That's, if it's true, an indictment on the coach, too. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, I thought he was trying to find a way about how he was trying to describe how comprehensively bad they looked in that game, and I think that he probably used the wrong choice of words.
That could be.
He probably also got a text message from Chris Fitz going, "Oh, it happens with your team too." Because the Wolves have said some of that similar stuff.
That's true.
During the regular season, So it's a head scratch when I think there's a new page in the playbook here where. If you admit that you have screwed up, then it's hard for people to get mad at you even more. I think athletes are starting to use the self-deprecation. Maybe Mike Pelfrey's running some of these media training sessions about how to avoid getting ripped too much. If you just admit that you stunk that night, people usually run out of questions. But I thought Heinz used a poor choice of words there, trying to think on the fly to come up with a creative way of saying how thoroughly bad they looked. In that game. So, but yeah, it was just, they had the game and they let slip through the fingers, and yeah, you have to have the puck to score on me, but if I have the puck, that means you can't score,
Exactly.
So, yeah, play possession hockey, play on their end instead of playing on your end, and that's the best way to kind of control the tempo, control possession, and you never know, they may now start to panic, pinch when they shouldn't pinch, overexert themselves when they're not supposed to, and there's opening, there's a goal, and then it's 4-1.
One more goal wins it. One more goal wins it. Let's face it. There's no question about that. Yep. Are you old enough to remember Falstaff beer?
Yeah, it's a Chicago thing.
Chicago thing, yeah. I don't think it exists anymore. Do you remember the commercials where Falstaff was known as the thirst slaker? Do you remember that expression? The thirst slaker.
I remember first slaker. I remember Lauren Brown is poisoning, but I don't remember first thirst slaker.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites. I don't know how it came up earlier today, but it did. And then I was...
How do you spell that?
It's spelled Slaker. And what's funny about it is
Slaker.
I always thought it was pronounced Slaker, and then some linguist said, no, it's actually Slacker. So then I corrected myself, and then a bunch of other people said, no, you were right the first time. It's actually Slaker, thirst slaker. Like it, takes away your thirst is the idea. It quenches your thirst. It's a great word. And I don't even think anybody uses it anymore.
Yeah, see, I just tried to throw Slaker on my phone, and I came up with Slacker.
Yeah, that's what it goes to. Yeah, it's a different spelling. All right, what's the Sunday column? Let me guess, another
Sunday,
Wemby apology?
No, it's not. It's not. On Sunday, how often have you been to St. Paul Saints games?
Twice.
You remember the guy who stands in the dugout and sings karaoke like in the 4th or 5th inning?
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
I do.
His name's Stego Matsubushi.
Yes.
He's a marathon runner. He's running his 100th marathon on Sunday.
100?
And he's running it around the concourse at CHS Field.
His 100th? Well, how many times around is that?
84. The USA Track and Field Association came out and certified the course around the concourse.
84 times.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's outstanding. It's his 100th marathon?
Yeah. He started. His first marathon was the Grandma's Marathon in 01, and he's been all over the country running marathons.
How old is he?
So they told him when you get close to 100, you should run it here.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
He's going to do it, weather permitting. He's going to start at 11:30. He expects to finish sometime during the 8th inning, and he's going to sing karaoke like he usually does at the appropriate break, which is going to be hilarious. So. Yeah, Seigo Matsubushi.
Let me ask you this. Now, what was I going to say? Was it about the marathon? No. Does Mike Veck ever come back for games anymore? Do you know?
No. Well, he sold his share of the team like 3-4 years ago.
Right. I know that. I just wonder if I've tried to get a hold of him a couple times. I haven't been able to.
I haven't seen him since. The last time I talked to him on the phone, I don't know if you remember, like a year or two ago, he bought a small percentage of a soccer team in Northern Ireland.
Oh, that's right. You did mention that. Yes.
Yeah. So I got him on the phone for that.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed him on the phone. So that was hilarious. So there's like a St. Paul Saints flag, I think, in the soccer team's arena somewhere. And the soccer team has a scarf inside Allery's, at St. Paul, which, has shuttle service to Saints games. But yeah, that's the last time I've talked to Mike. I have not seen or heard from him since.
Yeah, I'd like to try to catch up with him. I mean, I hope he's doing okay, but I haven't talked to him in a while. I always like chatting with him. All right, we'll look forward to the Sunday comm. That sounds like a good, innovative idea because now, especially if the Wolves get eliminated tonight, we're back in the abyss.
Well, yeah, because the Twins aren't helping us out right now. You know, even though they're only like 3.5 out of the division, but we are going to have baseball and the Lynx. The Lynx will start playing. Yeah, the Lynx. They had a good game last night. I watched on Prime against Dallas. Did you hear about the Dallas coach, his meltdown after the game? It was dramatic. Yeah. He basically said, what's interesting to me is it's the kind of rant that you often get from NBA coaches, but I rarely remember hearing from WNBA coaches. And he basically said, we got selfishness on this team. We got selfish players that have to figure out that it's not about scoring all the time. It's about making the plays that can help us win. And it fascinated me because we so rarely hear that out of a WNBA locker room. I don't know if it's a sign of, moving up in a sense in class that he was willing to challenge on that level. Now, Cheryl Reeve can be tough. We've heard Cheryl Reeve level her team pretty good, but it's pretty unusual. Yeah. He went off. It was a really good game, by the way. I don't know how much of it you saw, but it was a good game, entertaining game. I saw the fourth quarter. Yeah, very entertaining. I saw the fourth quarter. They fought, the Wings led most of that quarter, and the Lynx just kept at it and figured out ways to win. Olivia Miles was a hell of a draft pick. She's going to be great. There's no question about it. She is the real deal, 100%. That coach of Dallas, I predict that he gets fired before the year's over because if you play that card 2 weeks into the season, what's your next step after that? That could be a problem. I think he shot his wad right there. Well, you can do it. You can do it once. A little bit motivational speeches going on here. How many times is the question? Yeah. All right, we're going to go. We're late. Thank you. Talk to you later. Have a great weekend. That's Lavelle E. Neal III. Will you put him on hold? I can't do it. My cursor's not working. All right, we got 2 solid segments yet to go. I want to get to some texts that make no sense to me. A couple that do. I want to get to a little bit more on Wolves' strategy tonight against the San Antonio Spurs. Davey, maybe a couple final thoughts on post-mortem. A lot of Minnesota Wild players chatting with the Jackals today.
looking back one last time, and then maybe projecting ahead, whether they're going to be a part of the future of this ball club or puck club in this case, and then who knows what else. Don't forget the Wolves-Spurs tonight on the Fan. Opening kickoff scheduled for, I think, about 8:40 or so on FM 100.3 The Fan.
You're listening to Barreiro on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This report is sponsored.
The Fan welcomes some great shows, some Mystic Lake Amphitheater. The legendary Bob Dylan will be there July 6th. Motley Crue, August 21st. Santana and the Doobie Brothers, August 27th. Get complete details on all of our upcoming shows on the concert page, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Can you check the final score of that softball game involving, I think it was, they say it was Texas A&M?
Texas A&M and UConn, I believe.
They were up. They had 17 runs in the fifth. I'm trying to figure out if they got to 20. I've never seen 17 runs in a softball game, college softball, because usually it's 1-0. Like here's a game right now. Tennessee and Kentucky, top of the sixth, 1-0. Every other game I've ever seen in softball is 1-0. Feels like soccer to me.
Let's see. It looks like the final was 17-3.
Oh, that was it. So the UConn pitching tightened up after that. Good for them.
Yeah.
Texter guy, livid with me, writes 3-0 in the first, and we had that game. What a joke. You guys don't know bleep about hockey. 612 guy, here's all I can tell you. In the history of the postseason for the Minnesota Wild, they have had a lead of 3 goals or more 22 times in the postseason. Their record going into Game 5 in those, well, then it would have been 21 games, was 21-0. Undefeated. Their record is now 1-21. So you tell me that 3-0 in the first period of a playoff game is, what are you talking about? You make it sound like that's insurmountable. It's obviously not insurmountable, but it usually, in fact, it has always ended in victory for the Minnesota Wild in the postseason. So come on, man. Do your homework a little bit. Do a little bit of your research before you go off and lecture. Nobody likes to lecture more, other than me, lecture than hockey people about other people who shouldn't have hockey opinions. My God, man. You want to grow the game? You grow the game by allowing casual fans in on it. Stop acting like you got to be Herbie Brooks on a chalkboard laying out the Swedish weave passing system. Okay? Come on. It's just ridiculous. So, in any case, that, of course, teams have come back from 3-0. We understand that. But it was also, what was it, 3-1 was it 4 minutes to go? Again, that's not prohibitive, but that's a pretty good situation. So
you'd sign up for it at the start of the game.
Wouldn't you? I think that you would. I really did want 2 Game 6s. I thought that would have been so cool tonight. I even said, well, could it work out where, I wonder what time the Wild game, in fact, I think Fallness told me. He said it would have been a 7-10 start if we'd had a Game 6. So that's not overlapping enough. I was saying, well, could you go to both games? Not really, because the Wolves are 8:40. Ideally, it would be like the Wild at 6, and then they've wrapped it up. They're 3 goals ahead. They're up 3-1 with 4 minutes to go, and you just leave and you go to Target Center to see the other Game 6. Be a hell of a night, but unfortunately, it didn't work all that well. One thing that's missing in the Spurs series compared to Denver that would perhaps have made the difference is off-court trashing. Jaden did, which provided voltage for the Wolves to play off of. They were able to make a monster win with shorthanded players to take the series because of that. We needed Jaden to manufacture that. Well, I've said this a couple times. I actually think that the Wolves have been meeker than I thought they would be post-elbow. And again, I'm not calling for them to assassinate anybody, but I thought they would be spicier maybe deep down that tells us they're not as confident against this Spurs club, which seems to be, even though they're younger than Denver, a less flawed team. I think the biggest challenge for the Wolves, the biggest disappointment at this point, and I think I actually think they have a very good chance to win tonight. I really do. And to at least force Game 7. Is that if you watch this series in its totality, which team would you say, not knowing the ages of players and experience of players, which team of the two would you say, man, they need to get through some playoff series. They just don't look like they're quite ready for the big time here. They just don't seem to be able to maintain a certain offensive flow when things go badly. You'd say it's the Wolves, and the Wolves are the older team. The Wolves are the team that's been through the wars. The Spurs, now they have some experience, with Fox included, but overall, they're the younger team, right? And they have almost no playoff equity and experience. And yet, in that sense, I think they have held it together more consistently. Their offense looks more recognizable than the Wolves' offense has tended to be. And that gets back to what we're talking about with Johnny. It's basketball IQ stuff that I think it's amazing that continues to plague them. And it's a testament to their grit and to their, I guess you could say, their pluck and aggressiveness, that despite having some basketball IQ issues, they've made it to the Final Four each of the last 2 years, and they're even in the position they're in now. Imagine if they could improve that to go with what is some talent, interesting talent, and a lot, I think, I would say, of tenacity as well. Come back, one more break, right? We'll come back, wrap up the program, and get you prepared for the rest of the night.
Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barreiro on the Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
This report is
Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
It's brought to you by American Pressure.
Outstanding program today, including a post-mortem on your Minnesota Wild season and finish, and what might be coming next with Russo Radio. He joined at 4:30. Good 30-minute conversation with him covering a lot of ground. And there's more to cover. We'll get there. We're hoping to chat with Billy Guerin early next week. I think he and Heinze are going to meet the media on Monday, so maybe Guerin that day, maybe the next day. We'll see what his schedule might indeed allow. Also want to thank Johnny Athletic for giving us some bonus time today. Ben Goessling joined at 5 o'clock. Johnny was 3:30. And an out-and-out a shouting match with Lavelle at one point, although it eventually eased into more calm back and forth in conversation. He joined between 5:30 and actually closer to about 6:10. The Enough Said program can be watched tonight on Fox 9. I think on Fox 9 we're on at 10:30. And on the Plus, I'm not sure what time we're on there. You can always get us via the Fox Local app as well. Me, Gardsey, Lori Fisher. It's a very sportsy edition of the program tonight. Tonight later, we've got Minnesota Timberwolves Game 6 against the Spurs, which we've talked about on and off throughout the program. Opening faceoff is scheduled for just past 8:40 or so. Are you back for sermons on Sunday?
I am.
I'm back for this one. I might take a few off after this one, unless the Wolves keep going. So we'll see.
Yeah, think about it.
How that goes. But that'll be the plan on Sunday. And I had one other nugget that I wanted to pass along. What the hell was it? I'm not sure. I expect the crowd.
More thirst slaker.
Maybe it's thirst slaker related. Yeah. It's a great term that we're going to try to repopularize because it's a bit antiquated and dated, but that's never stopped us before on the Bumper to Bumper program. Thank you for watching. Thank you indeed for listening. And as I mentioned, we'll stay live and local eventually tonight with Wolves Game 6. I'm expecting a raucous crowd tonight. I think a crowd that's going to be fairly hostile to Wemby now that we all completely understand the degree to which he was, of course, victimized in that most recent game at Target Center. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you, as I said, Sunday morning at 9.
Whenever you need
Bring gas.
I'll be there. I'll be around.
Believe.
The Timberwolves need to win to extend their series with the Spurs in Game 6 from Target Center.